Morning, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and family. My name is Jason Fletcher. I'm your MC for today, and it's a humbling privilege for me to be able to stand here today to conduct this service where Huronui remembers Armistice Day 100 years ago. A few housekeeping things that we need to address for a start. Obviously, it is a warm day, ladies and gentlemen. We suggest that you hydrate as much as you possibly can during this time. If you're in need of any sunscreen, then compliments of the Cancer Society, we have provided some for you. There are toilets in the tin shed, as you see here, as well as upstairs. And I do ask at this very important time, and I watch 100 people clamber for their pockets right now, as you turn your cell phones off, please. There's one, there's two, and a few more. We do ask that everyone stands each time the parade is brought to attention, and you will hear that very heartening call coming from our warrant officer, Vince Binding, from New Zealand Defence Force. So please do stand to attention each time that they are called to attention. That, of course, will also happen during the two national anthems as well. At the conclusion of the remembrance service, you're invited to place poppies alongside the crosses that you may know and relate to. And then for those of you who haven't bought a poppy of your own, there is a basket beside the crosses as you enter the cenotaph area where you are welcome to place your poppy at that time. Also, at the the conclusion, I should say, of this remembrance service, you'll be invited to join us inside for a theatrical performance by some local thespians. There is limited seating inside, but there is also going to be some screens outside, so you're welcome to view from the outside if you choose to. Also, at the conclusion of the play, there will be a planting of a totara tree in the domain as a reminder of this particular occasion, and we encourage you to stay behind for that. Members of the Mounted Rifles will be joining the service midway through, and they'll be situated at the riverside of this area. We do ask that you keep a respectful distance to them from these animals and their riders, and as you already heard, there's another area you need to keep a respectful distance from, and that is the rather impressive artillery group we have down at the end of the domain here. Now, we do expect blank cannon fire throughout the course of this service, 100 blanks to be precise, and that of course is to mark the 100 years since the end of World War I. This is intended, as I'm sure you all felt when the first one went off, apart from a certain fright. It creates a sense of atmosphere to the commemoration service. So without further ado, we would like to begin with the service, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage to give you the opening and welcome Mayor Winton Daly.
Tēnā kouta, tēnā kouta, tēnā kouta katoa. Greetings. Nā mai, haramai. Welcome. May I extend a very warm welcome to you all as we come together today as a united Huronui community to commemorate the centenary of the end of World War I, signalled by the signing of the Armistice at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November 1918. I welcome all visitors to Huronui and trust that you have a rewarding time with us today. I want to thank all those whose hard work has brought this Armistice commemoration to fruition, and thank all those who have contributed in any way to make this a very special occasion. We appreciate the community support that we've received, and especially the amazing support we've had from individuals and organisations from further afield. Thank you to you all. Tragedies and disasters are an inevitable part of life. And just 3 days out from the second anniversary of our most recent disaster, It is not hard to see the similarities in the way communities respond and deal with these challenges. Self-reliance, stoicism, caring, sacrifice, positive thinking, and coming together are the hallmarks of a strong community in times of adversity. I have no doubt that our community 100 years ago had all those qualities and more. And we have proudly witnessed those same qualities in our community over the last few years. One of those important qualities is coming together. That is why it's important that we're all here together today, to remember those who paid the supreme sacrifice, and as we survey their field of remembrance, we remember the 186 members of our Huroneri community who lost their lives. We remember those who returned, wounded in body, broken in mind and spirit, and acknowledge the role of our Queen Mary Hospital in our district and the caring staff who nursed many of those wounded soldiers back to health. But we remember those who did not fully recover and whose lives were damaged forever. We remember the inhumane conditions our troops endured on the front lines, the sights no human should have to see, and memories no human should have to keep. We remember today those at home who kept the home fires burning, who toiled hard to support the war effort and keep our country strong. We remember especially the women who took the place of our servicemen on farms, in factories, women who laboured long and hard to provide the necessities of life, food, clothing and supplies to support our troops and those at home. And we remember those who bore the shock and heartbreak when the much dreaded news of their loved one arrived. We know that on this day 100 years ago, there was spontaneous gatherings in every town and village and much rejoicing that this horrific war was over and that our men would be returning home. We know that that jubilation and celebration on Armistice Day 1918 would have had a very sad shadow cast over them as the realisation hit home that many of their men would never return. Symbolically, this gunfire today, reminding us of the deathly sound of war, will fall silent at 1100 hours, as it did 100 years ago. I trust that we can continue to honour the whole generation who experienced the suffering of World War I 100 years ago by being equally strong in our own life's challenges and be prepared to stand up to be counted when called upon to defend justice and peace in our homes and in our communities, lest we forget.
Some very insightful words from the Mayor, and thank you for those. And having hailed myself from the Hanna Springs area, I would certainly encourage you to take the time over the next wee while, if not perhaps today, at another time where you might head to the Hanna Springs district, the township I should say, and check out the Queen Mary Hospital. It still has some fantastic feelings in amidst those old buildings there. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could please ask you to all stand now as our Parade Marshal calls the parade to attention. Please be seated, ladies and gentlemen. The next part of our service is an opportunity for the New Zealand Defence Force to provide a remembrance and address. And I would like to invite Commanding Officer of the HMNZS, Pegasus Lieutenant Commander Zoe Brangwyn.
Ena mana, ena reo, e rangatira ma. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Your Worship the Mayor, guests, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls. 100 years ago, the guns on the Western Front fell silent at the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918. The precious silence of that moment has been replicated in towns and cities across the world every time communities get together to remember, as we do today. We reflect on the sacrifice of not just those that served, but the communities they came from. The scale and intensity of the First World War dragged both individuals and communities into the war. Be they situated on or around the front lines, as they were in Europe, or tens of thousands of kilometres away, such as here in New Zealand. Today, 100 years on from signing of the Armistice, we also reflect on the mixed emotions that must have been felt by New Zealanders. Relief and jubilation alongside sorrow and loss. The New Zealand Defence Force values of courage, comradeship and commitment are evident in those who served and the communities they came from 100 years ago. Service personnel displayed courage to serve and fight, while those at home displayed the courage to carry on, support their families, community and returning servicemen, as well as the war effort. The simple act of mothers raising their children while fathers fought, or elderly parents working in young people's jobs, all the while wondering if their sons and daughters were alive and safe, required courage. Comradeship was evident in those that served, but also back at home. Comradeship can make even those most difficult of situations more bearable. And I'm sure that New Zealanders have many stories of how their families formed friendships and bonds that helped them get through. We can only imagine how many new widows and grieving mothers felt the warmth and love of their communities envelop around them while they received the dreaded telegram. Furthermore, we can be confident in the knowledge that this kindness and compassion still exists in our communities today when tragedy strikes. After the war, the formation of returned servicemen associations was an important part of this ongoing comradeship. And it is the community's support of these associations that have allowed their existence to continue in their great work today. You only have to look at the crowds on Anzac Day and here today, representing all New Zealanders in our diverse communities, standing together to tangibly feel this comradeship. Finally, it is the commitment of those who served and those left behind that ultimately led to the end of World War I. And in the wake of World War I, as it is today, we show the commitment to honour the past. Communities across the world built monuments through times of hardship and challenge, and these stand in town centres and street corners around the world as monument to those who served and didn't come home. Indeed, it is a great reflection on these communities that we continue to remember 100 years on. As we stand in front of these monuments today, we remember in order to honour both those that served and the communities they came from. The messages we take, the remembering we share, is a small step that we can all take together in making our world a better place for future generations. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you for those words from the New Zealand Defence Force, Zoe. We now move on to an opportunity for the Venerable Canon Amanda Neal to come to the dais.
Kia ora tātou. My name is Mandy Neal and I'm the priest in charge of the Glenmark Waikari parish. Today, for the first time, I bring you a tale of two grandfathers. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. The two grandfathers never met each other, but they both met an early death. Bob was from the Waikato and Tom was from England. As young men in 1914, they responded to the challenge of a great adventure that beckoned them. Bob and his big brother were in the Auckland Mounted Rifles. Like many others, they took their best horses overseas with them. 10,000 New Zealand horses went to World War I. 4 came home. The Waikari Harden Road displays a new memorial to 52 local men killed in action, and the war horses too. When Bob's horse was killed, he was retrained in field artillery. Bob was mentioned twice in dispatches for courage under fire and received the military medal. Bob's brother was mortally wounded in September of 1918. He was buried in France, but his name gleams along with many others set in gold letters etched into walls of white marble at the Auckland War Memorial Museum. Struggling with the sadness of his brother's death and very ill with chronic dysentery, Bob was granted leave in Edinburgh, and there he met and married a young Scottish lass. Tom was already married with a very young family when he went away to war. Tom was a captain in the Hereford Regiment, serving in the battlegrounds of Europe. He led his courageous men with such valour that his whole unit was awarded the Croix de Guerre by the French government. By Armistice Day in 1918, Bob and Tom had both survived their great adventure, which had become a living nightmare. Bob had endured the horrors of Gallipoli and then the trenches of Belgium and France, where Tom also suffered. Bob and his new Scottish war bride arrived back in New Zealand early in 1919. Tom and Bob and their families also survived the worldwide influenza epidemic. But only 6 years later, Bob was dead, accidentally killed in his occupation of an electrician lineman for Te Awamutu. As Bob and his co-worker tried to balance a new power pole in its post hole, a rainstorm broke overhead and Tom offered to fetch the raincoats. Leaving his mate supporting the power pole, Bob turned away to get the coats. In the pouring rain, his co-worker suddenly lost his grip on the slippery power pole. Of all the directions the pole could have fallen, it fell against Bob's head as it crashed to the ground. Bob had survived a world at war, only to be felled by a freak accident. It wasn't the war that cost him his life, but the war had certainly cost him almost 5 years of misery that he could ill afford out of his short 30 years. His young pregnant wife spent a week watching at his hospital bedside as his brain swelling increased beyond all hope. Bob died in his young wife's arms. 2 months later, she gave birth to their 4th child, whom she named after her beloved Bob. She and their children were left poverty-stricken. In 1943, the same year as Bob died, Tom and his young English wife had their 7th child. They had already been living in Geraldine in South Canterbury for 2 years. Tom had emigrated to New Zealand in 1922 after he was sponsored to be repatriated here. He'd been specially chosen by the Barker's Company of Geraldine for this new opportunity. He hoped to leave the ravages of war far behind him. His family had quickly followed him out here, his wife having been told that Tom would have a new home set up for them all by the time she was to arrive with the children. Instead, she found very little preparation had been made, and worse, she could see that Tom was very noticeably ill. Things became increasingly unravelled for Tom and his family until he could no longer carry out even simple tasks. He underwent shock treatment, which only worsened his condition, and he was committed to Sunnyside Hospital. In 1943, Tom was able to be transferred to the residential psychiatric hospital of Seaview in Hokitika, where many other shell-shocked and gassed former soldiers were living out their lives. It was a haven where basic gardening and other gentle activities brought some peace to shattered lives. But the damage to wounded spirits was irreversible. And Tom's children had never seen him again once he was forced into Sunnyside. Only this year have they managed to obtain a copy of his medical records covering these fearfully tragic years. By the time Tom's children were getting married, most had been led to believe that he had been long dead. Nobody spoke of the men whose minds had been so cruelly destroyed by their war experiences. Tom eventually died at Seaview Hospital in 1949. He and his family had been robbed of any normal life by the carnage of war. And what of the families that so many young men like Bob and Tom left behind? Devastated wives and mothers endured excruciating loneliness, fear and grief as they fought to bring up their children on the smell of an oily rag through the Depression and then through another world war. Their perseverance, their courage, their faith, their memories of loving husbands, and their love for their children sustained them through some pitiful decades. To be left on the home front during and after wartime was not for the faint-hearted. Yet it was the norm for thousands of New Zealand families whose daddies and mummies were unsung heroes and heroines, abroad and at home. Everyone made valiant efforts to struggle on in spite of their pain. These are the people we honour today. Men and women who would have loved to enjoy the best of peace after the worst of war, to build a decent family life at home. But war does not often allow for such restoration. War results in scars and disabilities, permanent injuries, imprisonment in various forms, loss of livelihood, and loss of life itself. We know that there is more than one way for war to steal good lives. I know that good came out of those dreadful times, but it was a constant pitched battle on the home front as well as on the battlefields to survive and eventually to flourish. I know that good came out of those dreadful times, because we are all here to witness to such goodness. I know that good came out of those dreadful times, because I am Bob's granddaughter, and my friend is Tom's granddaughter. We are so proud of our unknown granddads, as we hope they would be proud of us. How much we all owe to so many dear ones who persevered so bravely through the worst of times for so long. We know that we are here free to enjoy the sunshine today, because in so many ways they fought for us to be so blessed. Most of us have known what it is to be happy in families that have thrived in our peaceful country. Each of us has good reason to be here today, offering our thoughts and love from hearts of gratitude in remembrance of those forebears among our families and friends who made sacrifices beyond our comprehension. May God bless and keep us all in the peace that the world cannot give, the peace that passes all understanding. Mai iarangi kia papa, the land, the people, the spirit that binds. I invite you to stand as we sing together along with a congregation recorded at Westminster Abbey. The hymn from our service sheet, O God, our help in ages past. Please be seated. Let us pray. O God, we, the living, remember the dead. They died too young. They died in violence. They died in hope for a better world. With sadness at the grief of their loss, we hold them in our hearts. With thanks for their lives and inspiration, we trust them to your care. Accept our offering of this special time to you, that we may be meaningfully reminded of the sacrifices made by those who died, the homes they left so willingly to defend, and the victory and peace that they fought so courageously to bring about. Rest eternal grant unto them, O Lord, and let light perpetual shine upon them. May they rest in peace and rise in glory. Amen. We pray together the prayer that has brought comfort to so many men and women in times of war and peace. Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Let us now pray a blessing upon one another. God of peace, in your tender compassion, may your light from on high break upon us, to shine on all who dwell in darkness and in the shadow of death, and to guide our feet into the way of peace. Amen. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, could you please be upstanding for the lowering of the flag?
Hooray! Hooray! Ha! Hooray! Stand on! Hey!
Fabulous stories shared by those who have such a rich history, and those who take our history of the Huranui even further and hope to continue to tell those stories. I'd like to invite up 5 representatives of the Huranui Youth Council to call the roll of honour. If you'd like to come up on stage now, guys.
Amberley District, Broomfield, Lance Sergeant E. W. Arthur, Military Medal. Trooper A. Blaine. Sergeant J. S. Boyce. Private R. C. Bristow. Trooper H. R. Davis. Lance Corporal A. Alderton. Private H. Espley. Private J. Ford. Rifleman G. C. Gadd. Leithfield. Sergeant A. R. Greenwood. Gunner H. Macmillan Harrison. Private F. W. Hayes. Private F. G. Holton. Trooper P. Hunter. Private C. Jones. Rifleman J. C. Jones. Private C. L. Knowles. Private J. Lang. Trooper J. D. Wiley. Amberley. Rifleman J. W. McLean. Corporal J. S. McNeil. Private J. V. Midgley. Private J. J. Mockett. Lance Corporal W. H. Moore. Private J. C. Russell. Private E. R. Smith. Trooper G. W. Smith. Private R. T. Smith. Corporal J. R. Stanton. Private R. Stocks. Lance Corporal A. J. Turner. Trooper R. L. Wilk. Sergeant J. J. Williams. Sergeant G. Winskill. Corporal L. G. Winter. Private W. Warnell.
From Omahi, Trooper W. Carson. Lance Corporal W. J. D. Doig. Private W. H. Jukes. Sergeant T. D. Foster. Rifleman W. S. Galandis. Private C. D. Harris. Private G. Kerridge. Private D. Lilly. Sergeant G. Sager. Second Lieutenant J. B. Starkey, member of the Wiltshire Regiment. From Scargill, Private R. S. Atkinson. Trooper F. V. Birch. Sergeant C. F. D. Fox. Private B. S. Gibb. Private W. L. Harrison. Private A. McInnes. Trooper M. McInnes. Major P. J. Overton. Trooper H. Rudman. Private W. L. Shudrach. From Waipara, Corporal J. Hamilton. Private W. Walker. From Glenmark, Private E. T. Bock. Lance Corporal P. D. Clive. Private L. G. E. Hearse. Trooper A. H. Jennings.
Amiri District, Rotherham, Private M. Piper. Private G. Piper. Culverden, Corporal J. E. Burge. Private C. F. Cookson. Lieutenant F. Davison. Private H. E. Debenham. Private D. Hampton. Trooper A. H. Kingsbury. Private A. Mackenzie. Private H. Stoddard. Rifleman J. Toome. W. Reid. YR, Lieutenant Colonel A. Blewett. Sergeant A.S. Baker, Sergeant L.F. Baker, Private J.C.P. Brown, Second Lieutenant C.M. Caslett, Private T.R. Creed, Corporal T.L. Derrett, Rifleman J. Dowd, Corporal T.L. Hemner, Captain G.G. Harper, Military Cross Distinguished Conduct Medal, Private W.H. Higgins, Private E.T. Hill, W.J. Johnson, Trooper J.J. Kennedy, L. Lloyd, C.E. Mayo, F.E. Oldman, Sergeant T.C. Palmer, Private E.J. Parnham, Corporal F.P. Penwell, Brigadier H.E. Rinaldi, Private S.T. Rinaldi, Private A.C. Thompson.
Harden and Waikari. RAF Captain J.A. Allen, Sergeant J. Allen, Private R. Allen, Private A. Barker, Private F. Batters, Private G. Batters, Rifleman H. Boucher, Rifleman J. Butler, Private R. Butler, Private T. Campbell, Private L. Cook, Private M. Cowan, Private T. Crane, Sergeant G. Curry, Private C. Dullard, Distinguished Conduct Medal, Private G. Douglas, Private T. Fincham, Lance Corporal E. Gardner, Private G. Ginders, Private J. Glendenning, Private J. Gray, Private J. Gray, Private D. Lane, Corporal C. Lance, Private F. Lukey, Private R. Lusk, Private James McFlaren, Private John McFlaren, Private H. MacDonald, Private N. McIntosh, Private W. Mackay, Lance Corporal A. McPherson, Private A. Matheson, Private J. Mounsey, Private W. Norton, Lance Corporal H. Palin, Private W. Pilcher, Reverend Father R. Richards, Distinguished Service Medal and Military Cross, Sergeant P. Shelley, Sergeant T. Sheridan, Lance Sergeant C. Smith, Private F. C. Smith, Private F. G. Smith, Private G. Waters, Sergeant J. Weld, Private A. Wilson.
From Cheviot, Corporal J. Arnest, Private A. Bainbridge, Lance Corporal E. F. Barnes, Trooper E. G. Britton, Major W. R. Campbell, Distinguished Service Order, Corporal B. Clarkson, Rifleman A. R. Cooper, Gunner J. L. Cooper, Private J. Dalton, Private G. Davidson, Second Lieutenant A. Edridge, Rifleman W. H. Feather, Sergeant R. A. Fleming, Private C. Gills, Rifleman S. F. Hoey, Corporal B. K, Lance Corporal G. C. K, Private T. Lambert, Trooper L. M. Lehman, Private E.I.W. Lee. Private T.W. Lewis. Rifleman T. Lott. JTE J.M. Matheson. Private H.G. Mullet. Rifleman W. Monroe. Private W. Murphy. Sergeant T.A. Osborne. Gunner V.A. Osborne. Private G. Shaw. Second Lieutenant J.D. Sloss. Rifleman R. Sloss. Private R. Smith. Trooper L.M. Sustons. Lance Corporal N. Sustons. Private C. Tate. Lance Corporal F. J. Waynesborough. Corporal F. Wilkinson. From Hamner, M. Mackay, C. Stevens, H. Stevens, and C. Wilcox. Thank you.
Quite sombering hearing those names all being called out while the gunfire guys in behind. I'd like to take the opportunity to invite Deputy Mayor Mauri Black to the dais, who has a poem for us.
Why wear a poppy? Please wear a poppy, the lady said, and held one forth, but I shook my head. Then I stopped and watched to see how she'd fare. Her face was old and lined with care. But beneath the scars the years had made, there remained a smile that refused to fade. A boy came whistling down the street, bouncing along on carefree feet. His smile was full of joy and fun. "Lady," he said, "may I have one?" And as she pinned it on, I heard him say, "Why do we wear a poppy today?" The lady smiled in her wistful way and answered, "This is Armistice Day. The poppy there is a symbol for the gallant men who died at war. And because they did, you and I are free. That's why we wear a poppy, see? I had a boy about your size, with golden hair and big blue eyes. He loved to play and jump and shout, free as a bird would race about. As years went on, he learnt and grew and became a man, as you will too. He was fine and strong with a boyish smile, but he seemed with us such a short while. When war broke out, he went away. I still remember his face that day, when he smiled at me and said goodbye. I'll be back soon, so please don't cry. But the war went on and he had to stay. All I could do was wait and pray. His letters told of an awful fight. I can still see it in my dreams at night, with tanks and guns and cruel barbed wire, and mines and bullets and bombs and fire. Till at last the war was won, and that's why we wear a poppy, son. The little boy turned as to go, then he said, thanks, lady, I'm glad I know. That sure did sound like an awful fight, but your son, did he come home all right? A tear rolled down each faded cheek, and she shook her head, but did not speak. I slunk away, head bowed in shame, and if I were you, if you were me, you would have done the same. For our thanks is living is oft delayed, though the freedom was bought and thousands paid. And so you see, when a poppy's worn, let us reflect on the burden borne by those who gave their very all when asked to remember their country's call. That's we at home in peace may live, then wear a poppy, remember and give.
Thank you, Murray. Ladies and gentlemen, could I ask that you please be all upstanding for the laying of the wreaths? To lay the first wreath for the New Zealand Defence Force, Officer Commanding 3 Transport Company Major Rick Moore and Officer Commanding Youth Development Unit Lieutenant Commander Grant Bohr. From the New Zealand Returned Service Association, Local President John Davis. And the final wreath, on behalf of the community, Mayor Winton-Ellie and Deputy Mayor Ari Glenn. Ladies and gentlemen, the order of service now will be that we will have the general salute, the last post, the shouldering of the arms, the ode, and then 2 minutes silence.
Pray! General salute! Present! Up!
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.
Now will be the time that we take the opportunity to sing the New Zealand national anthem.
Hey
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. You've done extremely well. And also because I wouldn't like any of you to fall over, as you'll see, if you'd look up to the skies, ladies and gents, you'll see our Spitfire coming through. Rather an emotional experience for me being out there. I don't know what it's like for you out there. The next few items, ladies and gentlemen, we will be calling the parade to attention and dismount the guard. Then we will disperse and fall out. So if you would just indulge us for a little bit longer in this temperature. Please be standing, ladies and gentlemen.
Dismount! Again!